the starting point everyone overlooked. When people talk about success, they often picture corner offices, crisp suits, and polished LinkedIn profiles. No one ever imagines it begins with the sting of bleach on your hands or the ache in your lower back after scrubbing floors for 12 hours straight. But that was my beginning. The part of the story most people never saw, and truthfully, the part most of them wouldn't have cared to understand. I was 23rd, broke, burned out, and utterly invisible. Just a year before, I was still a college student chasing a degree I wasn't even sure I wanted. But everything changed the day my grandmother got sick. She was the only person who had ever seen potential in me, real, unfiltered belief, not the kind that came with expectations or strings attached. So when she needed care, I dropped everything. School, friends, my so-called future, the rest of the family, too busy with their promotions, networking events, and perfect suburban lives to even show up at the hospital. By the time she passed, I had nothing left. No degree, no job, no home of my own. I rented a room in a rundown apartment in a neighborhood where you kept your car doors locked even while driving. My mattress was on the floor. My fridge held mostly condiments and maybe a half-gallon of milk that was about to expire. I'd never felt so small. The only job I could get was cleaning houses. And let me tell you, there's nothing glamorous about scrubbing someone else's dried toothpaste off their sink while they sip lattes and scroll their phones in silk robes. It was humiliating at first. Every time someone looked past me like I was part of the furniture, every time they left a $2 tip next to a crumpled list of chores, it chipped away at something inside me. But I kept going. Rent was due. Life didn't pause because your pride was bruised. At family gatherings, my parents couldn't even say the word housekeeper. They'd just mumble something about me figuring things out. Vanessa Hart, my sister, would brag about her job in advertising, using words like campaign metrics and brand expansion, as if she were reinventing the wheel. No one ever asked what my days were like. No one cared about the burns on my hands from cleaning chemicals or the chronic back pain that made it hard to sleep. They thought I was a cautionary tale, and for a while, maybe I was. But one day, that changed. I was working in this beautiful home in the Hollywood Hills, the kind of place with heated floors and imported marble countertops that cost more than my entire annual income. The woman who lived there, Margot Delaney, was the type of elegant you didn't see often. Old money, classy, sharp eyes that saw everything. I figured she'd be like the rest, polite but distant. But one afternoon, after I reorganized her filing cabinet in under an hour, she looked at me and said, "You're wasted on this." I laughed. What else was I supposed to do? It's not like there were recruiters waiting outside to hire an ex-college dropout with 0 credentials and bleach stains on her sleeves. But she didn't laugh. Instead, she handed me a worn copy of The Lean Startup and said, "Read this, then read it again." That night, I read the entire book in one sitting. Something shifted. I didn't suddenly believe I was destined for greatness, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something more dangerous and powerful than hope. I felt curiosity, so I started waking up an hour earlier each morning to read. I swapped pop music for business podcasts while I cleaned. I studied my clients, what they outsourced, how they managed their time, what they paid for convenience. And slowly, a seed began to grow. What if I could offer something better? What if I reimagined home services, not as chores, but as luxury? Something high-end, discreet, professional. Something that catered to the lives of the people I worked for, but didn't yet respect me. The idea became an obsession. I ate ramen and rice for months. I skipped outings. I picked up extra shifts and saved every dollar I could. Eventually, I had enough to build a basic website, print a few flyers, and register a business under a name that would one day become global, Verity Lux. But no one knew. Not my family, not even my roommates, because I didn't need their approval to start. I just needed my own belief. It's funny now, looking back at that tiny one-bedroom apartment where the AC barely worked and the neighbors blasted music until 2 a.m. That place felt like rock bottom at the time, but it was really where everything began. It's where I learned how to bootstrap, how to budget, how to keep promises to myself. It's where Verity Lux was born, not out of privilege, but out of necessity, out of grit. And as I cleaned those early homes, tired and invisible, I wasn't just wiping away dust. I was laying the foundation for something bigger than anyone, including me, could have ever imagined. Because sometimes the lowest points in your life aren't the end. They're the start of your legacy. The quiet climb. The first time someone asked me how long it took to become a success, I didn't know how to answer. Was it the day Verity Lux signed its first elite client in Beverly Hills? Or the moment I saw my name on the Forbes shortlist? Maybe it was when I realized I no longer had to check my bank balance before buying groceries. But, in truth, success started much earlier. It began in silence, when no one was watching, when no one was cheering, and when every voice around me said, "You'll never make it." After registering Verity Lux, I didn't take a day off for the next 14 months. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., read for an hour, and was out the door by 7. I'd clean homes all day, drive home in my dented Corolla, and spend the evenings building spreadsheets, mapping workflows, learning how to scale. My office was a foldable table wedged between the kitchen counter and the back door. My chair? A hand-me-down from a neighbor's yard sale. The startup capital was every dime I had, $2,417.36 to be exact. I couldn't afford marketing firms or consultants, so I printed my own flyers at a 24-hour print shop and walked neighborhoods until my soles wore thin. Some days I barely ate. A carton of eggs and a 10-pound bag of rice stretched longer than it should have. But I didn't complain. That season of scarcity sharpened my instincts. It taught me to be resourceful, creative, relentless. In the beginning, I did everything myself. Cleaning, scheduling, billing, even troubleshooting plumbing issues when clients panicked. I learned the difference between Italian marble and Brazilian quartz because high-end clients cared. I studied the lifestyles of the wealthy not out of envy, but strategy. What did they need? What annoyed them? What would make them loyal? Soon I realized these clients weren't just hiring a cleaning service, they were outsourcing stress. So I leaned in. I offered closet organization, errands, pantry restocks, travel prep. If a client needed a birthday gift wrapped in Hermes ribbon by 3 p.m., I made it happen. If their dog needed grooming while they were in Dubai, I made a call. No request was too big, no detail too small. 6 weeks after launching, a tech investor hired me. He was the kind of man who didn't notice you unless you made his life easier, which I did. Within 2 months, he referred me to 4 of his colleagues. By the end of the year, I had 12 regular clients and had quietly hired 2 part-time assistants, but I still said nothing to my family. Every Sunday dinner was the same. Vanessa Hart boasting about her ad campaigns, Nathan Hart grumbling about real estate clients, Mom asking if I needed grocery coupons, Dad reminding me to keep my chin up as if I were on the brink of collapse. I'd nod, smile, and go home to sign contracts with new clients while they slept soundly, believing I was still chasing pennies. And honestly, I didn't mind. Staying invisible gave me room to grow. It shielded me from unsolicited opinions and kept my focus razor sharp. The fewer people who knew, the fewer I had to explain myself to. My silence was my strategy, and it worked. Year 2, I opened a second branch in San Diego, hired a full-time HR manager, invested in custom software that streamlined operations. I was now offering high-end home management in 2 cities and averaging $1.2 million in revenue annually. Still, I showed up to family dinners in my old sedan wearing off-brand clothes. I let Vanessa Hart slip me job listings just in case. I laughed at Dad's "some people just aren't cut out for the corporate world" speeches. Because what they didn't realize was I wasn't cut out for their world. I was building my own. Year 3, New York. Year 4, Miami. By year 5, Verity Lux had 62 employees, operated in 4 time zones, and broke $10 million in annual revenue. But not once did I gloat. I didn't trade thrift for designer. I didn't splurge on penthouses or wear my wealth-like armor. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. People think success is about applause, press coverage, viral posts. But the real kind? The kind that lasts? It's quiet. It's built in the hours when no one is watching, in the decisions you make alone, in the promises you keep to yourself when quitting would be easier. It's built in those 6 a.m. mornings when your body aches, but you keep going. It's forged in the fire of rejection, in the silence after everyone walks away, in the room you sit in alone with your laptop and your doubts, deciding to try one more time. That's where I lived for 5 years, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So when people ask how I did it, how I went from housekeeper to CEO, the truth is simple. I didn't announce it. I built it brick by brick, alone in silence, until the day the world couldn't ignore it anymore. Why I stayed silent. There's a certain freedom in being underestimated. People don't ask questions. They don't expect much. They fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. And if you're careful, you can let them believe whatever version of you makes them most comfortable. That's exactly what I did with my family. Not out of spite, not because I didn't love them, but because I knew the truth of what I was building was far too sacred, far too fragile to survive their judgment. At Sunday dinners, I let Vanessa Hart hand me leftover coupons like she was doing me a favor. I listened as Mom praised Vanessa Hart's marketing firm and Nathan Hart's new condo in Scottsdale, all while silently reviewing my own real estate portfolio that stretched from Soho to Santa Monica. I smiled through Dad's passive-aggressive digs about real jobs and how ambition doesn't come from cleaning other people's messes. What he didn't know was that I wasn't cleaning anymore. I was employing others, training them, scaling operations, negotiating 6-figure contracts while stirring my coffee and pretending I still live paycheck to paycheck. It was strange, this double life. In one world, I was the poor daughter scraping by with a bucket and mop. In the other, I was the founder of a rising luxury brand that catered to America's wealthiest households. At first, the contrast felt exhausting, but eventually it became a kind of armor. The more they misunderstood me, the more focused I became. Keeping it secret wasn't about revenge, it was about preservation. You see, I knew my family. I knew how they operated. They were loud about their accomplishments and louder about their judgments. I had watched them dismiss dreamers and laugh off anyone who colored outside their lines. I had seen them reduce other people's passions to hobbies and discredit anything that didn't come with a corner office or a corporate title. I couldn't afford to let their voices infect my vision, not when it was all still so delicate. So, I let them believe I was stuck. When Vanessa Hart mentioned her boss's bonus, I nodded and changed the subject. When Nathan Hart showed off his new smartwatch, I congratulated him, even though I'd just gifted my CFO a $50,000 bonus for closing a deal in Dubai. When Mom asked if I wanted her hand-me-down toaster oven, I said thank you and placed it next to my wolf range in the spare kitchen I never used. In their eyes, I was the family disappointment, the girl who never figured it out, and I let them keep that illusion. Because the truth is, their approval was never my fuel. Their validation wasn't the goal. What I was building wasn't meant for applause. It was meant to last. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. There were moments, quiet, sharp moments, when their assumptions cut deep. Like when Dad told me not to bring one of your weird thrift store gifts to his birthday. Or when Vanessa Hart joked, maybe eat before you come, we're ordering steak, and I know that's probably out of your budget. Every word was coated in condescension, dipped in the kind of pity that pretends to be kindness. They had no idea I owned part of that steakhouse. No clue that the designer clutch Vanessa Hart flaunted at brunch came from a label I held stock in. They didn't know because I didn't tell them. And I didn't tell them because I wasn't ready. Not to be seen, but to be challenged. I wasn't afraid they wouldn't believe in me. I was afraid they'd try to mold me into something I didn't want to become. You see, once people know you've made it, they start to interfere. They want to shape your story, take credit, suggest changes, or worse, ride your coattails. I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let anyone rewrite my narrative, so I stayed quiet. I chose the thrift store sweater over the designer blouse, drove the 10-year-old Toyota instead of the custom Tesla parked in a private garage uptown. I smiled through their assumptions, collected every jab like a receipt, and filed it all away for a day I knew would eventually come. A day when I wouldn't have to explain myself, because my story would speak for itself. And that day was approaching faster than they realized. Forbes had reached out. They'd discovered Verity Lux through a profile on innovative female-led companies. I didn't pitch them. I didn't ask to be seen. But my work, my quiet, persistent, relentless work, had finally caught the world's attention. The editor called me the hidden mogul, said they were fascinated by how I'd built $1 billion empire while staying completely under the radar. They wanted the full story. A televised interview, photos, a Sunday morning spotlight. I said yes, not for me, but for the younger version of myself, the girl scrubbing bathtubs with blistered hands who needed someone to believe in her. And maybe, just maybe, for my family too. Not to rub it in their faces, but to finally show them who I really was. Not the housekeeper, not the failure, but the woman who built something extraordinary without ever needing their permission. The moment everything changed, I didn't sleep much the night before the interview aired. Not because I was nervous, I'd already seen the final cut, but because I knew everything was about to shift. My name, my face, my story. It was going public. And with it, the carefully crafted illusion I had allowed my family to live in would be obliterated. For years, I'd stayed silent, let them believe what they wanted, let them scoff, dismiss, minimize. But not today. Today, the story I'd built brick by brick in silence and sacrifice was stepping into the light. At exactly 8:58 a.m., I turned on the television in my penthouse living room. No fanfare, no entourage, just me, a cup of black coffee, and my rescue dog, Luna, curled up at my feet. The intro music swelled, Forbes' Sunday Spotlight. The title faded in slowly, The Billionaire Housekeeper. How one woman quietly built an empire. There it was, my story. The camera panned across our Manhattan headquarters. The sleek Verity Lux logo gleamed against a glass wall. My team moved like clockwork in pressed uniforms and polished demeanor. Then came the footage of me walking through the lobby in a tailored white suit, heels clicking across the marble, confidence radiating from every step. My voice played over the visuals. People thought I was just a housekeeper. They didn't know I was building an empire. At that very moment, across the city, across the suburbs, in a quiet living room with a faded sectional couch and a half-eaten birthday cake on the counter, my family was watching. I could picture it clearly, my father in his recliner, mug of coffee in hand, Mom standing by the kitchen, still in her robe. Vanessa Hart scrolling her phone at the dining table, barely paying attention, until she heard my name. Emily Hart, founder and CEO of Verity Lux, now valued at over $3.2 billion. The room must have gone dead silent. I imagined the sound of Dad's coffee mug hitting the table a little too hard. Vanessa Hart's jaw slack. Mom gasping, hand to chest, mascara smudging. They had no idea. And that was the point. For so long, they saw only what they wanted to see. The struggling daughter, the girl who never found her way, the family's disappointment. And yet, right in front of them on national television was proof that they'd been wrong, spectacularly wrong. There were no dramatics on my end, no calls, no gotcha texts. Just the quiet hum of validation filling the room as testimonial after testimonial praised the company I built. Clients spoke of professionalism, of transformation, of trust. Investors praised our innovation. The footage showed me walking construction sites, leading boardroom meetings, and reviewing blueprints with architects in Dubai. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A split-screen comparison of where I started, photos of me scrubbing baseboards, folding towels, delivering flyers by hand, beside images of me today. Sharp, poised, powerful. Finally, the closing shot. Me stepping out of a black Rolls Royce. A reporter off-screen asks, "Why keep it a secret for so long?" I turned to the camera and smiled. Because success doesn't need validation, and sometimes the sweetest part of the journey is watching the ones who doubted you realize they never really knew you at all. Fade to black. I didn't even have time to refill my coffee. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. First came the texts. Mom, Emily, is this real? Why didn't you tell us? Vanessa Hart. Wait, this is you? You're the woman in the segment? Nathan Hart. Holy crap, Emily. I just saw the Forbes thing. You built that? Dad, we need to talk. Now. The irony was suffocating. They were finally seeing me, only because the world had seen me first. And for once, I didn't rush to respond. I let the messages pile up, unanswered. Instead, I walked into my garage where my real car, a 2024 Rolls Royce Ghost, sat gleaming under soft LED lights. I'd kept it tucked away for moments just like this. The ones that demanded presence, that required silence to speak louder than words. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather still warm from sunlight, and started the engine. The smooth rumble filled the air. Today, I wasn't coming over for brunch. I wasn't bringing a thrift store candle or showing up in scuffed sneakers. Today, I was showing up as myself, the version they refused to see for years. Driving through the old neighborhood felt like stepping back into a memory I no longer belonged to. Kids rode bikes down the street. A neighbor trimmed his hedges. But as I pulled into my parents' driveway in a car worth more than their house, the whispering began. The door swung open before I knocked. Mom stood there, pale and stunned, like she'd seen a ghost. "Is it all true?" she whispered. I held up my phone where the Forbes article still glowed on the screen. "You tell me." The reckoning. I stepped inside the house like I had 1,000 times before, but it had never felt like this. The air was thick, like the walls themselves were stunned. The familiar scent of lemon polish and pot roast still lingered, but everything else had changed. Or maybe, for the first time, they were seeing what had always been there. Me. Unapologetically, me. Mom backed up slowly, scanning me from head to toe like she couldn't quite believe what she was looking at. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why didn't you tell us, Emily?" Before I could answer, Dad came down the hall. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate. He looked at me with furrowed brows and tired eyes. The kind of look people wear when the world they built in their minds begins to collapse. "Emily," he said gruffly, "what the hell is going on?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I walked past them both and into the living room, the same one where I'd spent my teenage years grounded for talking back, or worse, for dreaming too big. I sat on the sofa I once cried on after being told I'd never amount to much if I didn't pick a real career. Now I was worth more than everyone in that room combined. Mom and Dad followed hesitantly. Dad stood, arms crossed, a wall of pride still holding him up. Mom sank into the armchair, shoulders slumped, mascara smudged. They weren't angry. They weren't defensive. They were lost. Vanessa Hart and Nathan Hart showed up 15 minutes later, both looking like they'd sprinted from their cars. Vanessa Hart's designer handbag swung on her arm like a shield. "Emily," she gasped, breathless, "this whole time you've been, living a double life?" Nathan Hart blinked in disbelief. "I Googled you. It's all real. You're Verity Lux." I nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." Vanessa Hart shook her head, baffled. "But you let us think you were broke." "No," I replied calmly. "You chose to believe that. I never said I was broke. I just didn't correct you when you assumed." Dad snapped. "You drove that beat-up car. You wore thrift store clothes. You asked us to go easy on birthday gifts. What were we supposed to think?" I leaned back and folded my hands in my lap. Maybe that I didn't measure my worth in labels. Maybe that I had different values. Or maybe, just maybe, that I didn't feel the need to perform success for people who never asked about my passions in the first place. Vanessa Hart scoffed. "That's rich coming from someone who just rolled up in a Rolls Royce." I leaned forward, my voice even. "The car wasn't for me. It was for you. So you'd finally see me? Because let's be honest, if I had shown up talking about managing 3 regional teams or closing international real estate deals, none of you would have believed me. You didn't want that version of me. You were comfortable thinking I'd failed." Dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You know what hurt?" I continued, softer now. "It wasn't the assumptions. It was how easy it was for you to believe I'd amounted to nothing. How none of you ever asked what I was building. You all wrote a version of my story without asking me to contribute a single page." Silence. Then Nathan Hart, more subdued than I'd ever seen him, asked, "But why keep it from us? Why not tell us what you were doing?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Do you remember when Grandma got sick?" I asked quietly. "I dropped out of school to take care of her. You all said I was being irresponsible, that I was throwing my life away." They all shifted in their seats. "When she passed, I had nothing. No job, no degree, no support. Not one of you offered to help, not even a place to stay. I took a job cleaning houses just to survive. One of those clients believed in me, gave me a book. That book sparked an idea. That idea became a company. That company became what you saw on television this morning." Mom's eyes welled up. She said nothing, just held her face in her hands. "I didn't tell you," I continued, "because I didn't want to fight for your approval. I wanted to build something for me. And now that I've done that, now that the world knows, I wanted you to see it. Not just hear about it. See it. Feel it." Vanessa Hart shifted again, her voice quiet. "I just thought you were still trying to find yourself." I let out a soft, almost sad smile. "I found myself a long time ago. You just never looked close enough to notice." Dad finally sat down. For the first time in my adult life, he looked small. "So what now?" he asked. "You just rub it in our faces?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here because, for once, I want you to really know who I am." I reached into my handbag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. And because tonight, I added, placing it on the table, there's a private dinner at the Paramount. I own it now. The whole top floor is reserved. Mom's voice cracked. We don't deserve that. I smiled gently. Maybe not. But I didn't build this life to punish you. I built it to prove that success doesn't have to shout. It can whisper. It can wait. And when the moment's right, it can walk into a room unannounced and change everything. The dinner that changed everything. The elevator ride to the top floor of the Paramount was silent. My family stood around me, Mom clutching her purse with both hands, Vanessa Hart nervously checking her reflection in the mirrored wall, Nathan Hart tapping his foot, and Dad standing stiffly, arms folded, eyes forward. No one said a word. They didn't need to. The weight of everything unspoken filled the space between us like fog. But this time, I wasn't drowning in it. I was standing tall within it, clear, steady, sure. The elevator chimed and the doors slid open to reveal a private host waiting beside a glowing marble corridor. "Welcome, Ms. Hart," he said, bowing slightly. "The dining room is ready." We stepped into the space I had personally redesigned just a few months earlier. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the sparkling skyline of Los Angeles, a panorama so vast and glittering it looked like a constellation had dropped to Earth. A long, black marble table ran the length of the room, flanked by soft velvet chairs and lit by floating pendant lights that resembled falling stars. In one corner, a live string quartet played a soft, haunting rendition of Claire de Lune. Even Vanessa Hart, ever composed, whispered under her breath, "Wow." The servers ushered everyone to their seats. Each place setting was tailored. Gold-foiled menus printed with their names, hand-folded napkins, and beside each plate, a single sealed envelope. I waited until the wine had been poured, until the lobster risotto had been served, until I saw everyone settle into this new, unfamiliar version of reality. Then I spoke. "Before we begin," I said gently, "I'd like you to open the envelopes in front of you." They exchanged hesitant glances, but complied. The room was filled with the quiet sound of paper being torn. Vanessa Hart gasped first. Inside her envelope was a simple chart, 2 columns. One listed her annual salary from the marketing firm she always bragged about. The other, my daily passive income from just 2 of my 8 revenue streams. At the bottom was a polite footnote. This does not include real estate or international holdings. Her hands trembled slightly as she set it down. Nathan Hart's envelope contained an email from 4 years earlier, an offer I had sent to his investment firm under a pseudonym, proposing a small stake in Verity Lux in exchange for early funding. His firm had rejected it, calling home services an unsustainable market. Below that was a short note that $100,000 investment would be worth $17.4 million today. He blinked, stunned, then slowly looked up at me. "Emily." I didn't know. "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I never took it personally." Mom's envelope held something more emotional. A list of every time I had asked for encouragement over the years. To come to an art show, to support a startup idea, to believe in me, even just once. Each one had been dismissed or forgotten. Attached was a photo of my very first office, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, furnished with folding chairs and second-hand furniture. Fully self-funded. Her eyes welled up with tears. She didn't speak, just held the photo close to her chest. Dad's envelope was the thinnest, a single sheet. A screenshot of the Forbes homepage with the headline, "The Billionaire Housekeeper, Emily Hart's Empire of Elegance." He stared at it for a long moment before speaking. "I was wrong," he said, voice low and gravelly. "I thought I knew everything. But I didn't even know my own daughter. I met his eyes. You saw what you wanted to see, Dad. A girl who didn't follow your rules. So instead of asking why, you assumed I was lost. He nodded slowly. No arguments, no defenses, just remorse. The rest of dinner passed in an unfamiliar quiet. No bragging, no underhanded comments, just a lingering sense of reflection, of humility. After dessert, chocolate soufflé with a raspberry drizzle, I stood and walked toward the screen behind the table. I want to show you one last thing. The lights dimmed. A slideshow began. Photos filled the screen of me cleaning houses, sleeping on the floor of my first apartment surrounded by startup books, designing the Verity Lux logo by hand, printing flyers at 2 a.m., taking calls from clients while eating ramen. Then came the early office space, my first employee, the first luxury home contract, our expansion to New York, Miami, Chicago. Then, the Forbes photo. Me in the white suit standing in front of the headquarters I built. The final slide was a photo of me at 23, smiling in the kitchen with Grandma, the woman who saw me when no one else did. Beneath it, the words, "She believed in me before I believed in myself." I turned back to the table. This dinner isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about showing you what you missed, who you missed. I'm not angry anymore. I don't need apologies. But I do need you to stop pretending I was ever less than. No one spoke for a long time. Then Mom rose, walked over, and wrapped her arms around me. "I'm sorry," she whispered through tears, "not just for not seeing you, but for never looking in the first place." I hugged her back. That night, something shifted. Not just in their eyes, but in mine. Because for the first time, I didn't feel like the girl trying to be seen. I was seen. And this time, I wasn't going back into the shadows. A week had passed since the dinner at the Paramount, and the world hadn't stopped buzzing. Articles continued to circulate. Podcast invites rolled in. Investment offers flooded my inbox. I'd just been named one of Forbes' most influential women of the year. But oddly enough, what echoed most wasn't the applause. It was the quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to chase, to prove, or to explain. I sat on the ivy-lined terrace of my brownstone, far simpler than the penthouse, coffee in hand, my dog Luna curled beside me. No headlines, no gold-trimmed menus, just stillness. A message pinged on my phone. It was from Dad. "Saw your TED Talk. You were incredible. Wish I'd listened sooner. Proud of you, Emily." I stared at it for a while, letting the words sink in. It didn't erase the past, but it was something. A bridge, maybe. A beginning. Because legacy isn't about the spotlight. It's about the impact that lingers after it fades. And in that moment, surrounded by quiet, I realized I had already arrived, not at the destination, but at peace, fully, finally, at peace. Life lesson, reflection. Sometimes the most powerful success stories aren't loud. They begin in silence, in sacrifice, in doubt, in a space where no one's cheering you on. Emily Hart's journey reminds us that legacy isn't built in the spotlight. It's forged in the quiet, thankless hours when no one's watching. While others dismissed her as a housekeeper, she was laying the foundation for a billion-dollar company, driven not by applause, but by grit, resilience, and belief in something greater than approval. For those in midlife, especially those who felt unseen or underestimated, this story speaks volumes. It's a reminder that starting late or starting small doesn't mean you're starting wrong. That the sacrifices you've made, the dreams you've kept hidden, and the quiet work you've poured your heart into, they matter. Success doesn't always look like suits or titles. Sometimes it looks like showing up every day despite the odds, staying true to your values, and building something that lasts. even if no one notices until the very end. And when they finally do, like Emily, you won't need to explain. Your work will speak for itself.